This is the part of science they don't usually put in textbooks, not because it didn't happen, but because it probably shouldn't have. See, science is supposed to have rules, ethics, boundaries, but sometimes people ignore all of that. And when they do, things get weird. I'm talking about a teenager who tried to build a nuclear reactor in his backyard. A hole so deep the Earth itself started acting strange, and experiments where scientists tried to control the human mind. And the craziest part? Some of this illegal science actually helped shape the world we live in today. So yeah, this isn't normal science. This is the stuff that shouldn't exist. Let's start with something that sounds completely fake, but it isn't. In the 1990s, there was a teenager named David Hahn. Normal kid, Boy Scout, into science. The kind of kid who actually liked reading chemistry books for fun. But here's where things start to go off track. He didn't want to build a volcano, didn't care about baking soda rockets, didn't want a simple school project. He wanted to build something real, something powerful, a nuclear reactor. Yeah, not in a lab, not in a university, in his backyard. Now, obviously, you can't just walk into a store and buy nuclear fuel. There's no aisle for that. So instead, he got creative. He started collecting everyday objects, smoke detectors, old clocks, camping lanterns, completely normal items, stuff people throw away, but hidden inside them, tiny amounts of radioactive material, americium, thorium, small, harmless on their own, but David wasn't using them normally. He started taking them apart, extracting the material, separating it, piece by piece, building something bigger. Now imagine the scene, a small backyard shed, metal tools scattered everywhere, jars filled with strange components, and in the middle of it, a teenager trying to split atoms. No supervision, no safety systems, no idea how far this could go. At first, nothing really happens, just experiments, trial and error. But then, something changes. He pulls out a device called a Geiger counter. It measures radiation, and it starts clicking. Click, click, click. At first, slow. Then, faster, until it's not clicking anymore, it's screaming. That's the moment everything shifts, because that sound means one thing: radiation is building up. This is no longer a harmless experiment. This is something real, something unstable, something dangerous. What David had built was actually producing radiation, not enough to power a city, but enough to trigger serious concern. And eventually, people noticed. Radiation levels around his home started rising, not slightly, significantly. That's when authorities got involved. Police showed up first, then things escalated quickly. Hazmat teams arrived, experts in protective suits, radiation detection equipment. They looked at a teenager's backyard like it was a nuclear disaster site. Barrels were brought in, contaminated materials collected, the entire area treated as hazardous. Imagine being the neighbors. One day it's quiet. Next day, sirens, suits, and radioactive cleanup, all because of one person who got a little too curious. And here's the part that makes this story different. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't building a weapon. He wasn't trying to break the law. He just wanted to understand how things worked. That's it. Pure curiosity. But curiosity, without limits, can go very, very far. Further than expected. Further than safe. Because science is powerful, even in small amounts, even in a backyard. And when you start pulling pieces together, things can scale up fast. Faster than you can control, faster than you can stop. And that's the real lesson here. Not that science is dangerous, but that curiosity needs boundaries. Because without them, you don't just learn something new, you might create something you can't handle. And by the time you realize it, it might already be too late. Now let's go from something small to something massive. During the Cold War, scientists in the Soviet Union had a simple question: how deep can we go? Not metaphorically, not theoretically, literally. So they started drilling and drilling and drilling, day after day, year after year. This wasn't a short experiment. This was a long-term obsession. It became the Kola Super Deep Borehole, the deepest hole ever made by humans, over 12 kilometers deep. To put that into perspective, that's deeper than Mount Everest is tall. Think about that. We've climbed the highest mountain on Earth. But digging down, That turned out to be much harder. At first, everything was normal. Just rock, pressure, heat, exactly what scientists expected. Layer after layer, Earth behaving like Earth. But then, as they went deeper, things started getting strange. Temperatures began rising, not slowly, faster than predicted, way higher than any model had suggested. The deeper they drilled, the hotter it got, until it reached levels that made equipment struggle to survive. And then came the real surprise: the rocks. At that depth, they weren't behaving like solid rock anymore. They didn't crack normally. They didn't stay rigid. They started acting like plastic, bending, shifting, flowing under pressure, almost like the Earth wasn't solid anymore. Imagine drilling into something, expecting hardness, and instead finding something that slowly moves around your tools. That changes everything, because your machines are designed for resistance, not movement. And that's when the problems started stacking up. Drills began to fail, metal started warping, equipment kept breaking, progress slowed down, not a little, almost completely. Every meter deeper became harder than the last, more expensive, more unpredictable. And yet, they kept going, because at that point, it wasn't just science anymore. It was a challenge, humans versus the Earth itself. And then, the internet stepped in and made the story even crazier. A rumor started spreading that scientists had lowered microphones deep into the hole and heard something. Not rock shifting, not machinery, screams. Like something was down there, waiting. Now let's be clear. That part isn't real. It's a myth, a story people created. But the fact that people believed it tells you something, because this project already felt unnatural, too deep, too extreme, like humans were pushing into a place they weren't meant to go. And honestly, even without the myth, the real story is still incredible, because what they discovered changed how we understand the Earth. They found that underground temperatures can rise much faster than expected, that deep rock layers aren't always solid and stable, that the deeper you go, the less predictable everything becomes. It forced scientists to rethink models, rethink assumptions, rethink what's actually happening beneath our feet. And eventually, they had to stop. Not because they reached the center of the Earth, not because they hit some final boundary, but because continuing was no longer possible. The heat was too intense, the pressure too much, the conditions too unstable. Machines couldn't handle it, and neither could the project. So after years of effort, they shut it down, sealed it, left it behind, and what remains is just a small, sealed opening in the ground. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just a quiet reminder of how far humans tried to go and how the Earth pushed back. Because sometimes science isn't about reaching the goal, it's about discovering where the limits are. And in this case, the limit wasn't technology, it was the planet itself. And the deeper we went, the more it reminded us we're still guests here. Now we go from digging into the Earth to digging into the human mind. During the Cold War, the United States had a very specific fear. What if someone figures out how to control thoughts? Not influence, not persuade, control. Because if that were possible, you wouldn't just win wars. You could control people without them even knowing. And that idea terrified governments. So the CIA decided not to wait around and find out. They started a secret program called MK Ultra. And the goal was simple: figure out if you can control a human mind. Sounds like science fiction, but this was real, funded, organized, hidden. And they were willing to try almost anything: hypnosis, isolation, psychological pressure, and yes, drugs. The idea behind it all was actually pretty straightforward. If you can break someone down completely, can you rebuild them the way you want? Can you erase parts of their personality? Insert new behaviors? Turn someone into a controlled version of themselves? Almost like programming a machine, except this isn't a machine. This is a human being. And that's where things started to go wrong, because humans don't behave like code. You can't just input commands and expect a predictable output. Instead, what they got was chaos. Different people reacted differently. Some became confused. Some became anxious. Some became completely unpredictable. There was no consistent result, no repeatable success, just a growing pile of data that didn't lead anywhere useful. And the more it failed, the more desperate it became. Because now it wasn't just about discovery, it was about not falling behind. If the idea of mind control was possible, they didn't want someone else figuring it out first. So the experiments kept going. Different methods, different approaches, different environments, trying to find something, anything, that worked. But here's the part that makes this story uncomfortable. Many of these experiments were done without people even knowing. No consent, no understanding, just individuals being used as part of something they didn't agree to. And that's when this stops being just weird science and starts becoming something else entirely. Because science without boundaries can cross lines very quickly. Over time, the program started drifting, less focused, less controlled, more scattered, trying too many things without clear direction. And when that happens, you're not really doing science anymore. You're guessing, testing random ideas, hoping one of them works. But nothing did. Not the way they imagined. There was no breakthrough moment. No, we cracked it discovery. Just more confusion, more uncertainty, more evidence that the human mind isn't something you can easily control. And eventually, the program started to collapse under its own weight. Too many failures, too many questions, too many problems. So it was shut down, quietly, without the kind of ending you'd expect from something so ambitious. And when people later found out about it, the reaction wasn't amazement, it was disbelief. Because the idea sounded so extreme, but it actually happened. And in the end, after all that time, effort, and secrecy, what did they achieve? Slow, not mind control, not even close. What they proved instead was something much simpler. The human brain is not easy to control. It's complex, adaptive, unpredictable. You can influence it, you can affect it, but fully control it? That's a different story. And maybe that's the most important takeaway. Some limits exist for a reason, not because we lack technology, but because certain things aren't meant to be controlled that way. Because once you cross that line, you're not just experimenting anymore. You're changing something fundamental, and the cost of that might be higher than we're willing to pay. So what do all of these have in common? A teenager building a reactor, scientists drilling into the earth, governments trying to control minds. They all crossed the line, but they also taught us something. Sometimes slow. Progress doesn't come from safe experiments. It comes from mistakes, from going too far, from asking questions no one else would ask. Now, that doesn't mean we should repeat these things, but it does mean even the strangest, most illegal science leaves behind knowledge, and maybe that's the real takeaway. Curiosity is powerful, but without limits, it can take you somewhere you didn't expect.